Okay.
You are good. We thought Cole was good.
Am I not good? Am I good?
You're good. You're
Right
good.
here?
We're live. Yep.
There we go.
Maybe not. Maybe it's on me. Tom, you there?
Yeah, I think so. We had talked about this before we went live. I think you were asking Cole to start the podcast because we're going to start off with Mike Norvell in Florida State to tee you up to be upset about this situation. Cole's having some technical issues. Everybody, but we're just going to get this thing rolling here as Cole's trying to get himself figured out. I'm Tom Hannifan. He's TJ Pittinger. We're waiting on Cole Thompson, but there's a lot of stuff we get to dive into here. The Lane Kiffin BS, the ACC chaos, what's going on in the SEC, the Heisman race, all that sort of stuff. But I think we do need to start with you, TJ, as a Florida State guy, and get your feelings on the fact that Mike Norvell has been confirmed by the university, by Alford, that he will be back in 2026.
I am probably a broken record at this point, but I'll try and give like the cliff because I've obviously done shows about this, reacted to this, talked about this quite a bit. And so if people are tuning in and they've already seen some of that, I really am just kind of giving it so that Cole and Tom I can kind of hear their thoughts and hear them react to what I'm thinking, whether that's justified or not. But yeah, I mean, it feels like after that Stanford game when they were 3-4 and they were on a 4-game losing streak and they lost as an 18.5-point favorite on the road at Stanford. And they came out with that. I mean, I'm just telling you that statement that they made about having a thorough evaluation. To me, that all just kind of like seems like BS looking back. And I thought it was I tweeted this to somebody that replied to me, but I thought at best that was just a misstep. It was a miscalculation to even put that out. At worst, it was a bold-faced lie. And they were not ever planning on doing anything. And they just didn't want to say that. I think they looked at the rest of the schedule, Tom, and they saw Wake Forest, NC State, Virginia Tech, a terrible Clemson team, and a Florida team that has 3 wins. And they thought, you know what, we'll probably win 4 or 5 of these games and we can just come back with him next year. And so that's what it feels like to me, because I don't understand if you're evaluating the program and you're evaluating the brand and you're evaluating Florida State and you're evaluating your ROI on, hey, this is what it's going to cost to fire him and hire new staff. And then this is what we're going to lose in ticket sales and booster donations and this, that, and the other. And TV revenue, now that the ACC is in a revenue share. I don't understand how you watched the last 4 weeks of Florida State football and thought, yeah, that's our guy. So if that's the case, what were you evaluating? I don't think they were evaluating anything. I think that they lied. More than likely not. They lied about doing an evaluation, and that was really just to buy time and hope that he would win more games. Now, I think that, why did they do it after one of the more embarrassing losses that they've had this season, which, again, there are several to choose from. I think the noise just got too loud. And they knew that they couldn't, they were going to have to say something because everyone assumed, go on every message board that exists, go watch Pate, go listen to JD, go listen to these national guys that report on the sport. They all assumed that this was coming and they were all being told, I assume by prominent boosters, I assume by people that may be working in the administration that this was likely coming. And so I think, they made a statement today that they were going to bring him back for next year. They really should have done this after Stanford, or they should have just done nothing. But if they were going to make a statement, they should have just done this after Stanford. But again, I think they thought that they could get a few more wins through the rest of the year, get to 7 or 8 regular season because the schedule was so bad, and then say, oh, well, we ended the season on a 5-game winning streak, like Florida did last year. We ended the season 4-1 down the stretch. Now, Florida, I've said this before, Florida's winning streak at the end was pretty legit. They beat LSU, who was top 10. They beat Ole Miss, who was a good team. They had some quality. Florida State has played 5 just absolute god-awful teams here down the stretch, and they've gone, or 4, and then they play another god-awful team who has 3 wins, and they're also a 3-point underdog too on Saturday. And they've gone 2-2. They'll likely go 2-3. But as they've told you this week, the results of that game doesn't matter, and the results of every other game hasn't mattered. I saw a tweet that was interesting. The last 3 Florida State seasons, 2023, 2024, and 2025, if you think about it, all the highs of highs and lows of lows that they've had, none of the games of any of those seasons have mattered at all when it, for different reasons. But apparently the 13-0 didn't matter. And then, winning 7 games over 2 years doesn't seem to matter to this administration either. So I've been told I've been told not that they have the money like they have it in their coffers. What I think is going to happen, they're going to keep him for another year. They're going to fire him next year because he's just not a good coach. He can't do it at this level. He doesn't recruit well enough. They've got to replace way too much off of this bad team than to rebuild another team. And so they'll probably fire him at the end of the year next year. And they'll save a total of $8 million. So if they have the money next year, but they didn't have it this year, they're going to basically save $8 million by kicking this can down the road. So congratulations to them for saving that money. Hopefully they don't lose that much in ticket sales and booster donations. But, they ran the greatest coach that ever coached in Tallahassee out of town for winning 7 games a year. And Mike Norvell apparently doing that over a 2-year span is good enough for this program now.
Cole, thoughts?
Look, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I think that, again, TJ kind of laid it out properly, but let's throw in another wrench in this entire plan. You waited too long and now there's too many good jobs available to where you're so late in the pecking order of being able to bring in a premier coach. Everyone is having these conversations. And this is Florida State, damn it. This is a program that should be considered a prominent school in the ACC and a favorite to win the conference title year in and year out. Like, I'm sorry, like the neglect to be able to understand that when things are going south, you're watching as other programs are willing to rip the Band-Aid off. Your school, Tom, and Penn State, LSU with Brian Kelly, all saying, we know that there are things that need to be fixed. And with you in charge, it's not going to get to that level. But the incompetence of understanding that we're going to hold out hope until the end of the year. Meanwhile, all these other jobs are opening on up. More jobs are going to become made available because of their coaches leaving other schools. And you've kind of backed yourself into a corner of, well, we're not going to get Lane. We can't get James Franklin. There's not really a premier name outside of those two. Drink is somewhat of an upgrade, maybe a little bit over Mike Norvell, but it's not enough to be so enticing. And now we're stuck with a bunch of G5 candidates. And Ryan Silverfield, good coach. Do we really want to go hire a Memphis coach back-to-back times? Alex Golish, good coach. Do we really want to go hire a G5 coach? Bob Chesney. Well, guess what? He's getting looked at by UCLA, and he's also getting looked at by Penn State. So you're third in line to land, maybe, in my opinion, the best coach available. You're not getting a lot of coaches from the Big Ten, and you're not getting a lot of coaches from the SEC. So you kind of just had to realize we messed up by not firing him after the Stanford game. We're so late in the process. We might as well just hold out hope until next season. Maybe he'll right the ship enough to where that buyout becomes even more lucrative in 2 years. Maybe we just need to fix a few things, but we all know the writing is on the wall. You're not winning with the guy Mike Norvell. It's abundantly clear that there are so many limitations with him as a play caller and as a leader in the clubhouse. And it just feels like this should have been solved a month ago, and you created more problems going into 2026.
Before Tom goes, I do want to not push back, but just a thought that I have. I understand the thought of like there are too many good jobs available. There is nothing saying that next year is not more insane. And I think that's what maybe bothers FSU fans. I think it's two-pronged. One, there's nothing saying that next year is not more insane. Who knows if USC opens? Who knows if Texas opens? Who knows if Michigan opens? Who really knows of anything, right? Like, and so, yes, this is a crowded coaching carousel, but there's nothing to say in this new age of NIL and rev share and everything else that like coaching timelines won't be smaller than they've ever been. The average SEC coach lasts 4 years, right? The Big Ten's a little bit longer, but the good programs in this country do not wait. And this year we saw coaches be fired at a more expedited rate than we've ever seen with, Napier did get the extra year, but with, Hugh Freeze and Brian Kelly and just whomever. So I do hear Cole on that, and I'm not pushing back on him because I do think that's FSU's thinking. But my problem with them thinking like that is that we think this year is insane. There's nothing saying that next year is not more insane. The other side of my thought on that is if you're FSU, when you know your car is broken down, I know you want to get back into a Mercedes, But if the car is literally broken down on the side of the road, you can't be picky at that point. And you have to take your chance on maybe it's a Ford Focus. Maybe, and I know that's not sexy for the fans, but to go the route, and I think that's what fans would think, right? Is, hey man, this is already broken. I'd rather take a 50-50 shot with somebody else, go hire a coordinator, go try and get a coordinator off one of these playoff teams than do this another year. So I don't know. Those are my two thoughts on that, but I'll let Tom roll in.
Tom, hang on just real fast. I just want to say also the other thing that's really important here is that look at Florida. Florida last season retained Billy Napier. They said, okay, we're good. We're going to win 5 straight games to close out the year. Everything will be peachy keen. Well, now they're in a tussle with LSU and Ole Miss to keep Lane Kiffin. If they would have just ripped the Band-Aid off last year, Lane Kiffin would be in the swamp. Lane Kiffin would be the coach of Florida. Lane Kiffin would be in a great position to probably lead his team to at least an 8 or 9 win season, and you wouldn't be fighting with anybody.
Yeah.
So by kicking the can down the road, you're also opening up chances to where a guy you really like this year, you may not be the top candidate for the opening next year. Just as a simple point.
It's interesting to me to see where this goes for not just Florida State football, but the athletics program as a whole. Because for a number of years now, we've been hearing about how Florida State wants to leave the ACC. It is a very difficult argument for them to make to move on when their football team is dragging the way it is and stuck in this rut the way they are with Mike Norvell. It tells me that maybe leaving the ACC isn't that high of a priority for them as we may have been led to believe in the past. And TJ, you probably have more insight on that. But for me, it's like, hey, you're not serious about leaving the ACC, because if you were, you'd be going after the major name or the right guy to try and steady the ship so your football program is driving you in the right direction so you can make that move, and it's a much more credible move. I think there was smoke with James Franklin, and it felt like James Franklin was more interested in taking the Florida State job or Florida or LSU if they had come calling within the SEC, but we know they were in love with Lane Kiffin the whole time. I think James Franklin wanted Florida State, and he probably checked in and was like, hey guys, like, what are you guys doing with Norvell? And they decided not to move on from Norvell. I think the hope, the light at the end of the tunnel that Florida State fans might hold on to is maybe James Franklin is just going to be at Virginia Tech for a minute. Maybe he's just going there because he wanted to have a job and do something for a minute. And then Florida State will open up and he'll be like, oh, I always wanted you. I always loved you. So TJ, you probably have more insight on any of that stuff than I do.
Yeah, on the ACC specifically, like I still think it's a priority, but that did get bumped down a little bit, probably to closer to 2030, just due to kind of when TV contracts. I mean, that certainly could play a role into it. The money, let's not ignore again, I think if you fire him next year, I saw somebody tweet that said, if Florida State keeps Mike Norvell, they owe him $8 million a year until 2031. And if they fire him next year, they owe him $8 million a year until 2031. And if they fire him the year after that, they owe him. So I get it. It is a lot of money. It's not like it's $100 million up front, so that is different than having to spend that money all at one time. But yeah, I mean, I think the settlement with the ACC, being able to get a little bit more revenue, and the urge to jump out of the conference is lower until about that 2030 timeframe, where I think they could make exponentially more money by being in a new conference when these TV deals kind of get renegotiated. And so that is, it's still a priority, but it's probably not an immediate priority by any means. But yeah, maybe their thought is, hey, we focus more on that and try and get if Florida State was in the SEC, could they really, like, at that point, could they be in it for Lane Kiffin? Could they be in it for a bigger name coach? Even if it wasn't Lane, could they be in it for like the second hottest coach out there? So I don't know, man. It still seems kind of dumb to me, but I understand some of the reasons. I understand the money is not in a perfect spot, but I was also told that if they needed to come up with the money, they could. So I don't know. I thought they had options and they decided to punt instead, which, maybe fitting the way that the game against NC State ended the other day with that ball off that guy's helmet. They punted the ball right into FSU fans' heads this morning.
Dude, the epitome of what was a Florida State season is watching 2 muffed punts on the same drive, 4 plays apart from each other. If that does not define what we have seen from Florida State this year, I don't know what is. TJ, there's a comment that I saw earlier. You get to make the call. Who are you hiring as the next head coach at Florida State?
Of realistic candidates, and Cole, you tell me if you think this is realistic or not. I mean, because obviously the answer would be, something unrealistic.
Yeah.
I think Glenn Schumann intrigues me quite a bit. Do you think you could pull him if you're Florida State? I mean, I feel like that's DC at Georgia. He coached under Nick. He coached under Kirby. He understands recruiting. He's a good recruiter. He brings a different, I know you don't necessarily just want to go hire what your ex wasn't, like the idea of going from offense to defense. But they've done offense a few times. And I really like the idea of bringing in a guy who has learned under both Nick and Kirby, understands recruiting in the South, is a good recruiter. And the best coaches in the country were all most of them were coordinators. And I think that's a lane that is not often tapped. Everybody wants the big splashy Lane Kiffin, or they want to get the group of 5 guy that's hot in Summerall, or, goalish to some extent before they kind of went on their little crap slide. But yeah, I think that would be a name that intrigues me quite a bit, is Glenn Schumann.
I would go with 2. Now, I do think that Glenn Schumann would be a good fit. I don't know if he would leave Athens for Florida State. That's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
First one is Brian Hartline. Brian Hartline's getting looked at by other schools in the Big Ten. Why is he not good enough to be the head coach of Florida State? That'd be priority number 1. Bring over his offense, continue to land premier players that I believe can be household names in the receiving assets. Look at and it doesn't feel like it's a good call after yesterday. What this team has been able to accomplish with physicality, I would at least for an interview, Dan Tinlin.
Yeah.
Disappear again.
Yeah,
Dan Tinlin would be the other name.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan Tinlin would be the other name I would consider. Because think about this, guys. USC currently has the number 1 recruiting class going into early signing period. Imagine if you could flip several of those defensive recruits and bring them on down to Tallahassee instead of going out to the West Coast.
I mean, it would certainly make fans happy. What's interesting about FSU's statement on that specifically is that they talked about hey, we understand that there have been recruiting deficiencies, so we're going to go ahead and revitalize that. I am very interested to see how Florida State plans to achieve that. In year 7 now of a head coach, how you can take a guy who, let's just call a spade, has been ass on the recruiting trail, how you can now make him into a good recruiter. They're doing this at a school level. So this is not, hey, we're beefing up our NIL, because obviously that's outside of the school level. So yeah, I'm interested to see how they make, Mike Norvell a better recruiter here over the next little bit to really get them into a position of success. But Tom, any final thoughts?
No, not necessarily. Honestly, it's it's sad for Florida State. Obviously, it's all over your face, TJ, as a Florida State fan. So
I'm supposed to be vacationing.
I know. No, I feel bad for Florida State, but you're digging your own grave. You're just sitting tight with mediocrity, and it's not even mediocrity. It's not even mediocre. It's below that for Florida State standards. So I think the thing you should potentially be worried about is, do they fire Norvell midseason? They make Gus Malzahn the head coach, the interim head coach, at least next season. From everything I've learned from you, TJ, that's not necessarily something Florida State fans are terribly interested in. And Malzahn's had a lot of different stops, but you can at least look at the national ranks for the offense and defense this year and see the incremental progress that they've been talking about. It's okay, are you really getting it in the right direction? And if that's what you're going on, then you better hope Norvell is able to retain a lot of this staff going into next year to try and improve things. But I just don't see it happening.
I have concerns about them retaining the staff. At least it would surprise me if both were back. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe one came back. At the point of an interim, I think fans would just be like Florida fans. Florida fans are giddy right now to lose to Tennessee by 30 because they know that they're getting a new coach. They didn't even care. They packed out the swamp. So even I don't care if they make Cole the interim coach. I would, I think at that point, you're just happy to have somebody new there and not the guy that has cratered your program. So from one coach to another, let's go to Cole for some Lane Kiffin talk here. Hey, we've got really good numbers today. I understand that a lot of you are here to hear about both Norvell and Lane Kiffin because those are two of the hotter stories. If you do us the favor of subscribing, we actually talk about all the big college football stories and then we preview all the games and break them all down too. So do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. We appreciate all those in the comments in the chat. But Cole, on to Lane Kiffin. You had a great analogy, or not analogy, but you said a great point. Right, and it was posted on social. Tom and I both shared it. But I'd love for you to make that point and then us to talk more about the Lane Kiffin situation.
So Lane currently is going to probably Waffle House. That's where he's going next. That's going to be his next stop. And then maybe he'll go get another massage and then he'll go do hot yoga. That's where he's going next. Now, as for where he goes long term, nobody has any idea. But I said this last night, and if you want to go check me out at Mr. Cole Thompson, I find it baffling that we're watching midway through the third quarter, Tennessee, a school he used to coach at, destroy Florida. I mean, put belt to ass, quite literally, nonstop, in the swamp for the first time in 2 decades. And LSU, that has a lot of talent, composite ranking, a top 15 roster, is struggling to pull away from Western Kentucky, even though you have a backup quarterback that started in the SEC before with Michael Van Buren. And you have a playoff team that currently is 4 quarters away from having its first 11-win regular season in program history, guaranteed to host a playoff game, guaranteed to still be in the hunt for an SEC title if a couple of things happen over the weekend. And you're looking at both those schools and saying, yeah, I gotta go to the swamp. No, I don't want to be here anymore. Nope. I don't want to be here. I gotta go to Death Valley. I gotta go ahead and head out over to Baton Rouge where they have all the resources possible. Like, if this does not show you that we as a society are actually living in the simulation world and all of us are NPC characters, I don't know what will. Because when everyone is giving you options and they're telling you, we're willing to do X, Y, and Z, including the school that you currently have built up to such a high regard and standard, at that point, what more do you want? Like, I would understand if you were to say, okay, Ole Miss is not going to offer you the exact same NIL deal as what you're going to get at LSU or at Florida. I would completely understand that. But they've already come out and said, and there's been multiple reports, whether it be from Ross Dellinger, whether it be from Chris Lowe or from NACOS, they're all willing to spend $25 million bare minimum in NIL. And the big thing that he had said on McAfee and everywhere else is that I'm not making this decision for money. I'm making this decision on what's best for my staff, what's best for my career. And if everyone is going to tell you, hey, legitimate expectations are met in Oxford, you are going to be the most loved coach in program history. You're already the all-time winningest coach in terms of percentage of win totals, and you have an opportunity to get your 50th win in 4 years, 3 straight 10-win seasons, and you're going to be in the playoff, and potentially you could win an SEC title, and we're going to give you all the money that we can, and we're going to give you a massive pay grade, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z to fix the complex, and we're going to fully invest in you as a coach. What more do you need to say? Because I understand that when you go to a place like Florida and LSU, there is definitely a little bit more high regard. I completely understand that. I do. But at the same time, with that comes major expectations to where if you fail in 2 or 3 years, they're not going to deal with the BS. They're not going to deal with the shtick and the trolling. They're going to say, hey, asshole, get back to recruiting. Hey, dumbass, stop making jokes on Twitter and call plays that we can actually win with. Hey, idiot, why are we losing in the 4th quarter to Florida when you said that you chose us over Florida? Why is Ole Miss holding its own against us when we paid a ton of money for you to come on in here? So, like, that's what you're going to expect when you go to those programs. And I'm not saying he can't win there. What I'm saying is that when everyone is seeing a perfect picture of you have made everything that you could ever want is currently in your disposal. Oh, and by the way, you're 4 quarters away from having the greatest season in Ole Miss program history. Why are you going to mess a good thing up when you know that the only thing to go from here is up instead of hitting reset in your entire career? And meanwhile, all of this pressure that we're hearing about how making a decision on Saturday, making sure that we're going to kind of be focusing on the Egg Bowl. We got to focus in on the players. Guys, do you understand how much more pressure that puts on you? Because let's be real for a second. If they lose on Friday and Lane Kiffin's gone, Ole Miss is going to be punished more than anybody else because if they lost to a sub-500 team, they don't have a head coach, they'll say, oh, well, they don't belong in the playoff to begin with.
Looking at this Lane Kiffin situation, we've talked about this from every angle for weeks. And I remember recently, I think it was a couple weeks ago, I was talking about, Lane Kiffin has prioritized his sobriety and his family over the last few years. And he's talked about how great Oxford, Mississippi has been for him, the community, his family, all those sorts of things. And the more that this has played out, the more I've sat with this and been like, that's BS. That's BS.
Yeah.
You might listen. I'm not going to understate the importance of family or someone getting sober. I know a bunch of people in my life who've done that. It's a tremendous accomplishment. At the same time, the guy who horribly handled his exit from Tennessee is the same guy doing all this stuff. He has not matured. He has made changes in his life. That's great. But he is still making this a 3-ring circus. This could have been figured out weeks ago. This could have been put to bed weeks ago. The fact that it leaked a few days ago that it's like, hey, they're going to announce this after the Egg Bowl. And then the money gets leaked. But he's also said the money doesn't really matter to him. So which is it, Lane? And it's just creating this national drama to the point that all Josh Pate has to do is tweet, I just got a text at wow or something like that. And it's 100,000 views. That's how hot this subject matter is. If that's what gets him off and that's what he wants out of all this, congratulations, mission accomplished. But from a head coaching standpoint, to the points that Cole just made, the best team, the best chance you have to get to a national championship, legacy, all those sorts of things that could potentially be important to a head coach, Lane Kiffin has right now in Oxford. If you go to LSU, it's going to take a few years to get yourself right unless you just crush the transfer portal in the next year and a half, right? This Florida team, are you going to make DJ Lagway from Anthony Richardson all of a sudden into, I don't know, what, a Deshaun Watson type quarterback from the days of Clemson, that is? I don't see him turning around either of those programs overnight. And let's also not forget that the hallmark of Lane Kiffin teams is they don't play any damn defense. They give up a ton of points. So it's like, how many people in LSU are going to be cool with that? How many people in Florida are just be like, cool, as long as you put 40 on the board, we're going to love it. These are my continued issues with Lane Kiffin, is that he is just not matured from the child that he has always been when it comes to handling his career and hiding behind these elements of his family and variety of other things that he says are priorities. It's BS to me. And at the end of the day, I side with Cole. If you're in that Ole Miss locker room, you're saying like, well, who's going to be my coach in a week? I want to play in the playoff. I'm hoping that I can make it to the NFL. Like, I'm hoping all these big things for me and my teammates. And all anybody's talking about is Lane Kiffin going to go to LSU? Is Lane Kiffin going to go to Florida? Meanwhile, they're having the best season, one of the best seasons in school history, and it's marred. And it's all because Lane Kiffin has no idea what he's actually doing with his career.
I wonder a little bit.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say, I wonder a little bit, like, you just know that Lane is the one that's feeding this fire and, doing the interviews and, setting this announcement date like he's LeBron with the decision and things. Like, it just, I will, to Lane's credit, this would have been the biggest story if Lane had never fed the fire at all. Like, it would have been a huge story. And I don't really know, short of signing an extension, I don't know what he could have done to really curtail it. And if the only option was to sign an extension, but he doesn't want to sign an extension, he wants to go elsewhere, then like how, I don't really, like, to be somewhat fair to him, I don't know how he could have handled this in like a perfect way. And we've talked about that. There is no perfect way to handle this because once it starts to leak, people are going to assume until you basically either sign an extension or leave. Would the best thing for him to have done be to leave 3 weeks ago when this came out? I don't really think that's a great option. It would have brought in finality and a whole lot less views to the channel. But it would have at least quieted things. But this would have been loud either way. But to Tom's point, yeah, I mean, he loves the fact that it's not quiet. That's why he's announcing a decision. That's why he is doing it, all these interviews. And that's why he's, shifty with the media and the questions that come in. And, Lane is the definition. And maybe we're all like this. And maybe if I was in his spot, I'd be doing the same thing. I mean, we all want our cake and want to eat it too. And that's what it feels like with Lane in this moment. And, I don't ultimately know what ends up happening. It would shock me if he stayed. I don't think you set an announcement date to stay like this, but I don't know. This has been a crazy situation, so who knows?
It's Lane, so anything and everything is on the table. Number one, Tom Pate's tweet has over 2 million views. I mean, that's how
Wild.
much traction we're talking about when it comes to just saying something along the lines of, wow, I know what's going on. And that's not a shot. The other thing I just want to make abundantly clear to the idiots in the comments section that think that I believe Ole Miss is an elite job, I think Florida and LSU are better jobs. I think Ole Miss quietly has become one of the best jobs that nobody talks about. I think LSU is the best job in the country when run properly. I think Florida's a top 10 job. You're going to have no problems winning there. You're going to have no problems bringing in recruits there. You're going to have no problems being able to bring in exceptional talent that never would consider Ole Miss from a recruiting standpoint, 5-star galore, and also knowing his unorthodox style of being able to trust the transfer portal. He's going to land a name or two. What I'm looking at, though, is the somewhat overall ambiance of what is Ole Miss. You've changed Ole Miss for the better because of how you've been able to adapt and transform this team underneath your image, underneath your tutelage. But at the same time, Ole Miss has expectations that you are supposed to meet. You've been given I would say, at least barrier, kind of like a bumper range, to be able to make a 8-4 season work and people not be coming for your throat. You go do that at LSU 2 years in. Year 3 is a crucial, pivotal year. You got to do it now or we're going to get rid of you. You do it at Florida, there will be people who said, I can't believe that we're spending money on this idiot. That's the nature of the business when you go to those schools. You got to be able to handle that. And I think Lane could. And I think Lane would have success at either school like he has success at Ole Miss. But do you want to deal with that extra added pressure? When your life is good, the resources are good, the commitment from everyone that we've seen in Ole Miss is wanting to double down. They see the identity long-term, and everyone seems to be on the same page. But I agree with TJ. You don't set a date to make an announcement just to say I'm coming back. You set a date to let it be known that you're leaving.
I mean, that's the thing. We don't know with Lane. He could pull the whole Wolf of Wall Street situation and just be like, I'm coming back. And what a reaction would get in Ole Miss. What a way that would be to go into the postseason, galvanizing the entire team.
I think it's very unlikely because I do think he understands that what would be best for his players and program is to shut down all the noise. But at the same time, Lane's crazy. I don't mean that in a bad way. I like Lane. He's entertaining to me. Yeah. But like he also might think like, yeah, I'm going to use this as a recruiting tool. I'm going to use this as a way to hype my guys up going into the playoffs. Hey guys, I picked you. Let's go. You know, I think that would be dumb. I don't think that that's the smartest thing to do. But I'm also like somewhat sensible, right? And I think that just quieting the noise would be what's smartest. But maybe Lane sees it as a situation where, you know, maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he doesn't know, and the ultimatum stuff is real. And Ole Miss said, "Dog, we're saying something one way or the other." But I would be surprised, you know. So there are paths to where I could wrap my head around like Lane announcing that he's staying, but they just don't seem very realistic to me.
Or we hear of a job that hasn't opened yet that is about to open. And Kalen Bohr leaves for State College, Pennsylvania, and Lane Kiffin heads on down to Tuscaloosa, which is why you just need to set the plane there to begin with to troll people. Let's just see that happen.
I'm here for that one. I'm here for both fan bases, or really all.
I'm actually very much. That would be the Alabama funniest outlook, in my opinion. Of course it would. And Lane was my first pick.
All right, let me give some love to Sleeper. We'll talk about the ACC, the SEC, and some other things and get out of here. I knew we were going to spend a lot of time on those, but make sure that you do have the Sleeper app loaded. You can use our code DFNS to get a 100% match up to $100 on the Sleeper app. Check their terms and conditions because terms of use do apply. Boys, the ACC is a complete nightmare right now, and Miami probably does. The rest of the conference does not deserve a spot in the playoff. Yesterday's results that matter. Pittsburgh knocked off Georgia Tech. Miami was close in the fourth quarter, 10-point game, but ended up beating Virginia Tech by 17. There are currently 5 teams available. Or 6 teams that still not control their own destiny, but are alive for Charlotte. I'll give you the real quick, high level. Here's what teams need to do. SMU and Virginia. This is the easiest and most likely clear-cut path. But whatever is supposed to happen in the ACC just doesn't happen. And so don't expect this to go down. SMU needs to beat Cal, which they should. They're a favorite. It is on the road. But SMU needs to beat Cal. and UVA needs to beat Virginia Tech. They're both favorites. That is what's supposed to happen. Both those teams have one loss. If they both win, they're in. That is what should happen. It won't, because the ACC cannot handle that. The team in the best place behind them is SMU.
Or Pitt, you mean?
Does SMU? Oh, SMU's there. Yeah. The best team behind SMU is Pitt. Pitt can get in by beating Miami and hoping one of those two teams lose. Very simple. Virginia Tech or Cal wins and Pitt wins, then Pitt is in, because SMU and or Virginia took themselves out. Miami can still get in, but it needs a lot of help. The most likely scenario would be that UVA loses to Virginia Tech, Miami beats Pitt, and then either Duke or North Carolina lose. It gets into like some really weird tiebreakers where it's basically your ACC strength of schedule. Duke is still alive, but they need even more help. If they beat Wake Forest, they need losses from Pitt, Virginia, and either SMU or NC State. And surprisingly, even though Georgia Tech looked like complete trash for 3 quarters yesterday, Georgia Tech is the 6th team that could get into this thing. They need they don't play this weekend. They play Georgia. But they need losses from SMU, UVA, and either Duke or Pitt. The ACC is a complete cluster. Cole, I already know what your point's going to be. They shouldn't be in the playoff, but one of them is going to get in. And maybe Miami, if some luck goes their way.
I'm begging at this point Miami, because at least Miami has a solid defense. They have an offense I think could put up points in the playoffs. They have a quarterback and an overall identity that I think could work on the road. At home, it will be on the road. So I'm rooting for that. If not, I am rooting for JMU. I am rooting for North Texas or Tulane as 2 G5 schools get on in. Because let's just call it as is, guys. You already know that whoever is the ACC representative not named Miami is going to lose in the first round. There is no opportunity. Like, you could convince me that a team from the G5 level, whoever is that number 5 spot, has a better opportunity than a school in the ACC pulling off the upset. So at this point, why not have the team that won every single game in their conference? Why not have the team that lost one game by 14 points and nearly mounted a comeback on the road in Louisville? Why not throw them in and keep their coach around a little bit longer before he takes a job out in State College, Pennsylvania, or Los Angeles, California? Why not do that? Because at least then we're showing as a committee we do care enough about the records. But you can't convince me in any world, shape, or form that an SMU with horrendous losses to Baylor, with losses to TCU, terrible execution outside of that Miami game, belongs in the playoff over a Utah team, over a Vanderbilt team, over a BYU team. Any one of them. You can't convince me of it. Michigan, I think, has a better argument. Texas with 3 losses, who I can't stomach at this point, thinking that they belong in. They deserve to be in more. So if it's not going to be Miami, then I'm sorry. I would just root for JMU and North Texas or Tulane to go ahead and be the 2 representatives.
At this point, it's like you let in the champion and be done with it, because I don't see any other team here that really makes a whole lot of sense. It's wild to me that Miami is 5th technically in the ACC standings right now, and they're the leader in the clubhouse to be in the college football playoff. Like, this really should be a 3-team race, and there are still Georgia fans that are worried about Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech has slowly disintegrated as the season has gone on. It's not reflected in their win-loss record, but the way that they play, it's affected them. They play a physical brand of football, and it's caught up to them. So I don't expect Georgia Tech to upset Georgia, the most difficult team to keep down in college football this season. But some wild things are happening in the ACC right now. And I'll tell you what, it's just going to be, unfortunately, an embarrassment, I think, for the ACC, because Miami's the only team that I see that could maybe get out of the first round. Every other team that could potentially win the ACC should get beat in the first round. And then everybody's going to be sitting there being like, why do we do that? Why do we let these guys in? It's going to be ballpark, same thing we feel about the group of 5. And that's alarming for what is supposed to be a Power 4 conference.
So if Miami gets in, they're likely the 10 seed, because even if they get the say they get in at the at-large, the ACC champion and the group of 5 champion are going to be 11 and 12. So the 10 seed plays whom? The 6, which at this point looks like it'll probably be, I don't know, Oklahoma
or Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss.
Yeah.
That'd be a fun matchup. It would be fun to see. But yeah, the ACC is a dumpster fire. They just, they had a chance, I think, for Georgia Tech to at least if Georgia Tech beats Pitt and then keeps it close against Georgia, you'd feel like, all right, well, maybe with some time off, they can rest up, get healthy. I mean, they're a shell of themselves. Nice comeback to cut it to 7 last night. Nothing there when it was all said.
They've given up over 1,600 yards of offense in the last 3 games. I mean, come on. You can't defend that at that point.
No, it's terrible. And a lot of that was to Boston College.
I would really like to see Ken Dorsey take his jersey back from Carson Beck, because it was not worth it to unretire that number for one of the best Miami quarterbacks, frankly, one of the best college football quarterbacks of all time, to give it to Carson Beck this year. It looked like a good idea for about 4 weeks in September, and now it's just we probably shouldn't have done that.
When I was watching that game last night, I was really excited because I was like, oh, good, Pitt looks really good, and they're going to beat Miami next week, which they still may. And then Georgia Tech came all the way back, and I didn't think Pitt was bad by any means. This is not me crapping on them, but it just felt like Georgia Tech mistake after mistake after mistake, whether it was a pick six or whether it was multiple missed fourth down attempts, not being able to tackle. Pitt, again, very well. Early pick in that game, Pitt, Miami.
I would take Miami far and away.
Where's the game?
In Pittsburgh.
Oh, you're talking about next week. I thought you were talking about in the ACC title.
No.
I still take Miami, but I don't feel good about it.
Mario in November is a scary thing, but I think
nasty conditions potentially at Pitt.
I'll tell you what. I refuse to allow Pitt to get in the playoffs after Pat Narduzzi said that this game against Notre Dame doesn't matter. The second that you said that, I'm out.
If he does, it will be hilarious.
It would be
I don't want it to be. The other thing is that fake punt they ran last night to give Georgia Tech an opportunity. I am so scared that Pat Narduzzi may be able to out Mario Cristobal next week. Pitt will have the game, and then Narduzzi pulls a Mario, and that's why the Canes end up getting into the playoffs. So let's make my awful mental health week even worse.
Well, how about this, boys, real fast? Did anybody else notice Brent Key last night and how he was coaching?
He's got a job on his mind?
He is probably headed out to Gainesville pretty soon, or the Plains of Auburn.
Yeah, he looked like Mike Norvell looked like the entire season last year, was my point of reference. Looked like a sad puppy dog the entire night. So, all right, let's talk about the SEC a little bit. I don't know why I switched to Tom, but I meant to go to Cole here. The SEC, not as convoluted, not as crazy. And maybe the good thing about this one is there are some scenarios for different teams to get in. But they're all good teams. And so, varying levels of good. A&M still controls their own destiny. They can be in with a win. Bama still controls their own destiny, right? They win and they're in against Auburn. Losses by those two teams could open things up for other folks. Ole Miss still alive. Georgia very much alive if one of those two drops. But again, just like the ACC, if the top 2 teams hold serve, they will make it. But some room for chaos here in the SEC.
Yeah, let's just call a spade a spade. There's 2 teams already locked on in. Georgia and Texas A&M are going to the playoff. Both could lose on Saturday. It doesn't matter. They will be in the playoff because one will be 10-2. The other one will be 11-1. No harm, foul whatsoever there. If Alabama were to lose, I think they are out of the college football playoff picture altogether. It's clear that the committee is going to penalize you for losing conference games late in the year. They moved from 4 to 10 just because they lost by 2 points at home. So they lose on the road to an Auburn team that needs this win to get bowl eligibility. They're going to be out of the playoff conversation. That would then open up the door for Georgia, if they win this weekend, to go to Atlanta or just stick around Atlanta. If A&M and Alabama were to lose this weekend, Ole Miss, should they win on Friday, would put their ticket into Atlanta to potentially win their first SEC title. How about that, Link Kiffin? Just another wrench to throw into the entire plan of you leaving early.
Oh my gosh, I have the scenario that I'm cheering for now. So what is it if both those teams lose? I need to cheer for Auburn and Texas.
You need to cheer for Auburn and Texas. And also you need to cheer for Ole Miss to win.
Who do they Mississippi State. Yeah.
The Egg Bowl. Yeah. So you need to cheer for them to win. So
worse. And so that will happen on Friday. The other 2 games are on Saturday. Well, no, does Texas A&M on Friday too?
Texas is on Friday night. Yeah. So Friday's schedule is 11 a.m. Egg Bowl. 2:30 Old Fashioned Hate, 7 o'clock Lone Star Showdown. So
Good.
the Iron Bowl would be the last game that you have to wait for.
There's a better slate on Friday of this week than there was on Saturday of last week. No offense to the schedule makers or the SEC for playing their bye week this week. But which LSU almost didn't get out of. Yeah, that's what I'm. Well, part of me wants to see Ole Miss lose. Sorry to the Ole Miss fans, because I do want to see if the committee would drop them out.
That's so mean. But, I mean, real, they would.
No, I don't. I
believes. Yeah,
my team won all their games, man. I don't care. I don't care about anybody's feelings anymore. My feelings come out of drink now. Look at this. It's
here's my
okay, but there's. All right, go ahead, Tom.
So where's Vanderbilt in all this?
That's the point. So there's a few other things that you got to look at. Is let's say Oklahoma were to lose this weekend after winning on Saturday against Mizzou to an LSU team that won by 3 against Western Kentucky. Well, then Oklahoma's out of the playoff because you can't have them at 9-3 and Texas at 9-3. And with the head-to-head win for Texas, you have to have them behind Texas. So Texas would make the jump on up. Here would be the really interesting scenario. What happens if a BYU or a Utah loses this weekend, Miami loses this weekend, and Texas and Vanderbilt win? Well, Vanderbilt would be sitting at 10-2. Texas would be sitting at 9-3. Texas would have one major loss to Georgia, a major loss to Ohio State, and then a loss to Florida. But they would have wins over Oklahoma, a top 10 team, Texas A&M, a top 10 team, and Vanderbilt in the head-to-head, which was a top 10 team. So even though Vandy would be ranked ahead of them, that would be the conundrum that you would throw in with the committee to say, hey, if head-to-heads have to matter at some point, and Texas scheduled a tougher non-conference game, do we make them jump over Vanderbilt at this standpoint? Has Vanderbilt kind of tapped on out?
I don't think so. And I know we talked about this specific scenario a couple of weeks ago. Because what the committee's saying, so like on to like Notre Dame, Miami for a minute, what they're saying is we're not considering head-to-head because we're grouping these teams differently.
Sure.
I think when Texas got blown out against Georgia, they are now in a different grouping than Vandy. I think, like in my mind, I don't know what the specific numbers are, if it's this 5 or this 2 or this 3, but when they're looking at it, I think Texas getting just mollywopped by Georgia is the problem. Now, that said, they go and beat Texas A&M. Maybe that moves them up a grouping, but I still think that really bad loss, just unprepared. I know they look good against Arkansas, but that I think I might lean Vandy there. And I didn't a couple of weeks ago. I leaned Texas at 9-3, but it is a tough decision. I agree.
I think if Texas beats the Aggies, that's a pretty big resume builder for a team that by one score to the number 1 team in the country to open the season. Arch Manning and company, and I know we'll talk about the Heisman picture here in a moment, not saying he should be in it, but he has steadily improved every single week to the point that he is carrying more of the load for that offense for Texas. So I think if they beat A&M, then they have a much more legitimate case to be in, and then it's kind of up to the gods at that point. Oklahoma, the Iowa, the SEC, it's the best defense in college football, in my opinion. And I think if you get them into the playoff, if they're able to get in, I think that team is actually built to make a little bit of a run. Offensively, it's brutal to watch, but there's still a good chance that that style of team could have success in the playoff. I think we've learned that much about what the playoff looked like last year. And then Vanderbilt, it's like you would need some help. You would need some other chaos, I feel like, because for them to win in Knoxville, while impressive, it's not as impressive as, for instance, if Texas beat Texas A&M, something like that. Also, I was unaware that the Pavia family in general had so much access at the University of Vanderbilt. I was like, good Lord, like I didn't realize this was the Pavia family show all of a sudden. And I'm just hoping he doesn't.
Oh, dude, the statue's already being cemented for him right now out in front of First Bank Stadium.
It's wild.
He's earned it. I mean, listen, he brought national relevancy to Vanderbilt, a team that everyone kind of laughed at after he said, Vandy, we effing turn. I mean, like, think about go back to the start of the year where he made all of these prolonged promises about Vanderbilt football and then delivered. Like, he's delivered on every single spectrum at this point. They're in the college football playoff hunt. He's in the conversation to win the Heisman Trophy. He had a phenomenal day yesterday. They're going to have a potential 10-win season, even if they were to lose on Saturday. Like, build the damn statue for all I care.
Speaking of statues, that was our next topic. Tom, tell me a little bit about the Heisman.
I'd love to say I told you so. And TJ, what were we texting about a little bit earlier on today? And it's something I thought would be the case with the Heisman when we talked about this, like August or July.
The only thing I can think about that we were texting about was how much I hate Mike Norvell. But
there's that. But also when it
other
comes to
than that,
when it comes to Heisman, there was a certain
running back. Yeah.
Jeremiah Love. In my opinion, Jeremiah Love makes the most sense at this point in time for the Heisman. I don't think he's going to get it. I think it's ultimately going to be whichever quarterback wins the Big Ten championship game. And I still think that's a sham in the grand scheme of things. Fernando Mendoza has had his Heisman moments, albeit brief. I don't think Marcel Reed is getting enough love at this point in time. He kind of came on late and obviously being down 30-3 against South Carolina at halftime. And that was kind of his Heisman moment there in the second half to really break on through. But Julian Sayin, I think his story should be over for the Heisman. What they did against Rutgers this past weekend, granted, Ohio State took care of Rutgers at home 42-9. It was 14-3 at halftime, and obviously they pulled away mightily in the second half. Julian Sayin, I think, was 13 of 19, well under 200 yards passing. I think one touchdown pass, had 7 completions to Max Clare because Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith were not able to play. Some concerns about Jeremiah Smith's health as he was kind of walking around a little bit gingerly on the sideline. So we'll see what Tate and Smith are able to do potentially against Michigan. So that's going to be a huge game coming up. Julian Sayin looked very human. And that's okay because he's still a really young quarterback. But I do not want to hear the people say Julian Sayin's the best player in college football. He has been hitting water falling out of a boat for most of this season. And yes, he had 3 consecutive weeks where he had over 300 yards and 9 passing touchdowns in those 3 weeks. Played phenomenally well against average to below average play within the Big Ten. My own Penn State and Nittany Lions at the time were part of that. Plus, I think the other ones were Purdue. And then this Rutgers game comes up and he looks very human. And that's okay. He's a good quarterback. He's going to be a great quarterback at Ohio State. I have no doubt. But he's not the Heisman Trophy winner. The best player on that team is Jeremiah Smith. The second best player on that team is Carnell Tate. The third best player on that team is Jackson, number 97, the defensive end. The fourth best player on that team is Caleb Downs. Actually, I'd probably put him at first. So, I have never been of the opinion that if you aren't the best player on your team, you can be the Heisman Trophy winner. So, in my mind, rule out Julian Sayin. Jeremiah Love, granted, Notre Dame mollywopped Syracuse this past weekend, and there's been a lot made about Notre Dame's strength of schedule this year. But for me, it really should be 3 guys, Reed, Mendoza, and Love. But I have a feeling it's going to wind up going to whichever quarterback between Ohio State and Indiana wins the Big Ten championship game.
Cole, no SEC love for this. Well, I guess Reed is there.
Listen, Marcel Reed, I think, belongs in the conversation, but I want to go back to what the award is all about. The award is supposed to go to the best and the most impactful player in college football. And if that is going to be the case, there should be 3 names mentioned before anybody else. And I completely understand Julian saying, I do not think he is out of the race whatsoever. If he plays extremely well on the road against Michigan, he gets right back in that conversation. I think if you say the exact same thing about a guy like Fernando Mendoza, if Mendoza comes out and he continues to swing the way that he does, he has the numbers. He has the accolades. He's led Indiana to a 12-0 season, which again is unheralded. Like, even for me, who was high on Indiana, I thought they'd be a 9-3 team. They're instead about to have an undefeated year. But to me, it goes to the 3 most important players to their teams. The first one, in my opinion, is Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love is the most complete player in college football. And in my opinion, he's the best player in college football. He is impossible to stop. He has all of the elusiveness in the open field, great home run speed. He is not afraid to go ahead and live on a contact. He was limited in his first 2 games. Guys, ever since then, he has been averaging over 122 yards per game, and he has scored a touchdown in every single matchup since week 3. So he has done everything asked of him, and he is a big reason why you can take a lot of pressure off of CJ Carr. You don't have to worry about the passing attack being full up tempo. You can just put the ball into the arms of Love, and he will swoon the fan base off of their feet as he waltzes his way into the end zone. So that's number one. Number two is Jacob Rodriguez for Texas Tech. I get it. A defensive player is never going to win the award, but there is not a more impactful player for that team this season than Jacob Rodriguez. He does everything. He's forced 8 turnovers this year, if I'm not mistaken. He's one of the top 5 guys in tackles. He's one of the top 5 guys in tackles for loss. Like, we're seeing these numbers be put on stage that are right iridescent of a lesser tier Will Anderson. And if Will Anderson Jr., who was the best player in college football in 2022, didn't win the Heisman Trophy, the committee has an opportunity to kind of make up for it and say, we do care about the defensive players. And number 3 is Diego Pavia if he wins on Saturday. Now, he's got to win on Saturday to be in the college football playoff. But Vanderbilt is not in the playoff conversation without Diego Pavia. Vanderbilt is not a team that we view as a legit threat to go win multiple 9+ games without Diego.
Yeah, I was going to say, are they a bowl team without Pavia?
They're not even a 4-win team without Pavia. And then I get it. We can talk about how, well, he's stat padding at the end of the game against Texas, and he threw for 467 yards against Kentucky. Well, keep in mind, there were the same people that were going into the last week saying Kentucky with the hottest record in the SEC was going to end the Pavia dream. And he just goes on out and says, screw it, I'm going to have 5 touchdowns. I'm going to complete 14 passes in a row. I'm going to deliver time after time after time. I'm going to put up monstrous numbers. Oh, and if that's not enough, I'm going to lead my team back down by double digits against Auburn to keep our playoff hopes alive, and we're going to take down one of the best defenses in the SEC. If the award is meant to go to the most impactful player on their team, those are the 3. Jeremiah Love, Jacob Rodriguez, Diego Pavia. Those will not be the 3 that you will see in the Big Apple. I will be shocked if you even see one of them.
Let's finish up with this. I'm just calling this quick hits. Just any singular. I mean, if you want to do more than one, that's fine. But we might do this in an hour if we all just do one. Anything from the weekend that stood out to you? I know it wasn't an insane slate. We didn't really get much chaos. Everything kind of went down like it was supposed to. Tom, it looks like I'm starting with you because that's where I landed. But what's your takeaway from the weekend?
I'd like to highlight Oregon taking care of business against USC. I think there's been a lot of questions about Oregon this season. I'm a big fan of Dante Moore. I know he's had some inconsistent performances, but this was about as steady as you could ask for. Malik Benson stepped up in a big way. That running game for
former Florida State transfer that couldn't do anything in Tallahassee. Good job, Mark Norvell.
Sorry.
So bitter. So bitter.
No, you get 12 months of it now.
Dan Lanning put together another great performance. I love his shot at the SEC there after the game, and especially the thing I really liked, and it was kind of tying back into this Lane Kiffin situation, is that Dan Lanning was asked on College Game Day, it's like, hey, like, it's weird, like, you're one of the best coaches in college football. We haven't heard your name in any of these head coaching searches for these major programs. He's like, yeah, because I'm exactly where I want to be. And Reese Davis joked, he's like, yeah, it's funny how, like, that's all you have to say. And it's like, yeah, that's all Lane Kiffin really did have to say weeks ago when any of this came up, if he truly did want to stay at Ole Miss. But I digress. I thought that this Oregon team did a very nice job handling a USC team that had to have it. And USC did not play badly, but that's just a better Oregon team, and it's tough to win at Autzen altogether. Indiana knows what it means to actually beat the Ducks up in Eugene. So I thought that was eye-opening. Lincoln Riley and company, like, I still don't think Lincoln Riley's on the hot seat. That's a good offense, banged up after the Iowa game from a few weeks ago, so I don't hold it against them too much. But USC definitely eliminated from playoff contention after that loss. But it was a good performance. I just don't know how much further Riley is going to be able to take this without otherworldly quarterback play. Maeva is a solid quarterback, but not doing anything outrageous from that standpoint. My other ones I saw, BYU taking care of business against Cincinnati on the road. Thought that was an important win within the Big 12. And then Utah, Kansas State, in an absolute shootout in, I believe, was that Whittingham's last game?
It's potentially his last game.
So, like, you could feel the emotion. I've been a big fan of Devin Dampier transferring from New Mexico to Utah, seeing how, he's had his struggles this season, but Utah is always a tough out, especially at the must. So those were really interesting. And then Tennessee just killing Florida in the swamp. For so long, you guys had talked to me about, like, hey, you can't take anything for granted when Tennessee does go to the swamp. And that UT team, that thing was completely wrapped up at halftime, and they took their foot off the gas in the second half because they could.
They did not even care in the second half. And they knew Florida couldn't do anything about it.
Shout out to Arkansas, at least a decent effort against Texas. But the one thing I'd like to point out, I mentioned Arch Manning before, I think everybody might have just gotten the year wrong on when he could contend for the Heisman. It's just not going to be 2025. It might not even be 2026. If he decides to stay longer and longer, I don't know what his eligibility looks like, but 2027, Arch Manning, like, he's progressed. He's gotten better every single week this season. I think because of his last name, idiots like Paul Feinbaum are like, he's going to be the greatest quarterback ever. It's like, no, he's a young quarterback who's starting full time for the first time this season under Sark. And if Sark actually stays and helps continue to develop this kid, he could be something really special.
You mentioned people getting Arch Manning's year wrong. Florida State's admin did not put a year on that evaluation. So maybe they were meaning the end of next year too. Cole.
I won't spend a lot of time. For starters, I want to go to the Big Ten. I was very impressed with how Michigan looked on the road against Maryland. This felt like the ultimate trap game a week before you go face off against Ohio State. Got to keep your playoff hopes alive. 440 yards of offense, really good performance overall from Bryce Underwood to respond after the bad overall outing he had in the second half against Northwestern at Wrigley Field. This feels like a team that, if it plays its brand of football, has a shot against Ohio State. I don't know if they'll win, but they have a shot. A 25-point differential against a team that really, I think, is now trying to buy on into the belief with Mike Locksley coming on back next year. It's a good tone setter, I think, going into next week because of it shows that you can win on the road and you can win in so many different facets. You're not just a defensive team or a militant team. You can win a little bit through the air as well. 250 passing yards and a 2-touchdown day for Bryce Underwood was really, really promising. Oklahoma has a college football national championship defense. Oh my God. I mean, they made it clear, hey, Bo Pabula is going to beat us today. That is the only way that you are going to win this game. We are going to take out the number one runner in college football. Ahmad Hardy is going to average less than 2 yards a play, and he's going to finish with less than 60 yards on the afternoon. So if you want to win, you got to win downfield with the explosives. They force-fed Kevin Coleman, 115 receiving yards, but they also had 2 interceptions, and you can't make these type of back-breaking mistakes against a defense like Oklahoma that is feasting on the defensive line, that is putting pressure on quarterbacks into making mental errors. And once again, we saw it well on display against a Mizzou team that looked like it gained back its mojo and decided to play its quarterback that gave them the best opportunity to win. Now comes the other part of it, which is where the shoe has to drop. They have an offense that could keep them out of the college football playoff. They do. Like, I understand that you are not healthy at running back right now. I understand that John Mateer is still coming off and dealing with the hand injuries. But you are relying so much on explosive plays and opportunities for teams to be desolate defensively to give you the chance to strike downfield. That's what I noticed. I mean, if you take away the 86-yard touchdown pass to Isaiah Satanga, guess what happens? You have only 85 passing yards. My bad, 87 yards. You only have 86 passing yards. So you are very much a anemic offense that is not having any bit of momentum, which is tiresome because you're wasting a defense that quite literally could catapult you into the conversation of a national title threat. It showed on up against Tennessee. It showed on up against Alabama. It showed on up against Missouri. It's going to show on up, I think, against LSU, and you're going to be in the playoff. But at some point, the dam breaks for everyone, and you're going to need to ask yourself, hey, can your offense go downfield and get us one touchdown drive? We got to have it because our defense has done everything possible. Are you trusting Oklahoma over Oregon offensively? Are you trusting Oklahoma over Texas Tech offensively? Ole Miss offensively? Alabama offensively? Like, and I know you beat Alabama, but consistently, are you trusting Oklahoma's offense to be able to get the job done? It feels like it's just such a gut punch because, yes, Oklahoma can, I think, win a national title with its defense. They could be an easy first-round exit if they don't. Final thing for me, it is a shame that we are only probably going to get 1, maybe 2 at most Big 12 teams in the college football playoff because we have to make room for the G5 and for the ACC. BYU has made it clear that they belong in that conversation. I think Utah's made it clear that they belong in that conversation. And I think that if they're able to put a really good cap off on the season in both of their final games, and then whoever gets to go to Arlington, and one of them beats Texas Tech, I think that they both deserve to be in. I think that 2 teams absolutely belong in because of at least, I think at this point, you're watching these teams not have the self-inflicted wounds down the stretch that would really hurt them at this time. So I was very impressed with what I saw from both Utah and from BYU to get the job done. One on the road, one at home, and one with the comeback victory against a Kansas State team that has completely unraveled this year.
Because I have nothing else to live for. I am cheering for BYU. Honestly, to upset Texas Tech just so that they can both get in. As far as my wrap up, I will do it in 6 seconds or less. On that note, thank you guys for tuning in to the Power 2. We will be back, I think, Wednesday at noon. I think maybe we talked about Tuesday night. I don't know, boys. I don't know what we're doing. We'll figure that out before we get there. If you're subscribed, it doesn't matter. You'll see it when it pops up. So hit the subscribe button. Appreciate you, both of you, for being flexible, doing this now. We had really good numbers, so hopefully people do subscribe. We will talk about Lane, I'm sure, on Wednesday too. Give some final predictions before the decision, LeBron Part 2, happens. So thank you guys for tuning in to College Football Addictions, the Power 2. We will talk to you soon.